Welcome back to Under the Moon Paranormal Ohio Legends. My name is Melanie. And just before we start, the views and opinions expressed on this podcast is solely of the creator and may not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the listener. All information on each topic is searched by humans. No AI tech was used or harmed in the creation of this podcast. The April 2024 full moon occurs in the sign of Scorpio on April 23rd. Let's delve into the astrological significance of this lunar event. Energy and transformation. The Scorpio full moon brings forth a blend of darkness, glamour, mystery, and romance. It carries an intense and transformative energy that occurs in change and emotional honesty. Some may find it challenging to express what lies beneath the surface. Be thoughtful when discussing intimate matters, remaining fully present and aware of how others respond to your words. Consider how certain partnerships affect your overall well-being. Reflect on whether the ties that bind you are worth holding on to. Shadow aspects. The shadow side of the lunation reveals where manipulation, jealousy, and possessiveness create toxicity. It may bring startling revelations to dynamics operating from lower vibrations. Unresolved issues could resurface, especially while Mercury retrograde aligns with the nodes of fate. Be cautious if loved ones start placing blame or pointing fingers. Richness and bonds. Despite its brooding elements, the full moon offers opportunity for growth. Healthy dynamics can intensify bonds, and new commitments may be on the horizon. Scorpio energy seeks true partnerships, always searching for the one shining star it can fully surrender to. Vulnerability is necessity when inviting love. Personal empowerment. On a personal level, this full moon brings waves of empowerment. Scorpios aren't afraid to cut ties, start fresh, and destroy what no longer serves them. Master this energy with compassion and self-preservation. Eliminate what no longer aligns with your path, emerging stronger than ever. Remember, this celestial event invites bond intensity and growth. Stay grounded and make choices that nurture your well-being during this transformative time. All right, so that's a little information about the full moon. Okay, so this month we're going to dive into Ohio Grassman. Yes, that's right, my friends. Ohio has its very own type of Bigfoot or Sasquatch kind of creature. So let's throw another log onto the fire and sit back, and let's get into this month's episode. If you live in Ohio, you probably think Bigfoot is the last guy you're going to see while out for a walk in the woods. But sightings of this elusive beast are on the rise in your state. Ohio is allegedly a favorite haunt of the big hairy guy. In fact, according to this geographical database in Ohio is right up there with notorious Bigfoot hotspots such as California, Oregon, Washington, and Florida. This might be surprising to some, but we'll see there are some good explanations for how a large creature like Bigfoot may be lurking in Ohio. Like any wild animal, Bigfoot would require food, shelter, and safety, and he would be able to find these things in abundance in the Buckeye State. Bigfoot is also allegedly spotted in many other eastern states such as Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Virginia. This brings up more than a few questions about how the creature remains hidden, evades capture, and has dodged bullets of hunters for so long. It turns out Bigfoot sightings occur all around North America. Believers say this creature is smarter, stealthier, and more resourceful than we had ever imagined, and he may be hiding right in our own backyards. Here's a look at how many Bigfoots can get, how Bigfoot may be getting in to the state of Ohio. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit of history. For almost 150 years, Ohio residents have reported a creature called the Grassman lurking about in rural farms and fields. The Grassman is a monster alleged to inhabit Ohio and western Pennsylvania. And looking back at reports, it's almost certainly a Sasquatch. The first sightings occurred in 1869 when witnesses described it as a large, hairy, bipedal creature up to 9 feet tall. The beast allegedly eats wheat and other tall grasses, hence the name. But this is a food source we would expect a more omnivore like Bigfoot to take advantage of or given the chance. Some researchers theorize that the Bigfoot population in more agricultural areas of Ohio may have adapted to consuming cereal crops. This would too make sense, as planted crops would provide an easy source of food for an enterprising Sasquatch. The Grassman has been reported to share many characteristics similar to Bigfoot, but the grass-eating thing is not the only difference. For instance, the Grassman has also been spotted in groups, where most Bigfoot sightings are of a single individual. And like the skunk ape in the South, the Grassman is reported to give off a strong pungent odor. There are traditional Bigfoot reports from the state as well. If Bigfoot isn't abundant in Ohio, as many experts believe, we have to assume it's not because of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's the state's strong college football team, the Buckeyes. Bigfoot needs food, water, and shelter, as well as a certain amount of security from us meddling humans. Even a creature as large as Sasquatch can find such things inside Ohio. And the history of the region makes the state even more Bigfoot friendly. We may think of Ohio as an eastern state, but really it was part of the Northwest Territory established in the 18th century. The population of Ohio in 1800 consisted of only 34,000 European citizens. New York alone had over 60,000, and Philadelphia had 40,000. If my facts are wrong, forgive me. I am searching on the internet every time I make an episode. So blame the internet. Even the Native American populations in Ohio were in decline prior to this. In the 17th century, a combination of disease and war with the Iroquois tribe from the east had declimated so much of the indigenous population. Eventually, they would begin to recover. So while the eastern part of the country was flourishing, Ohio was largely populated by the Native American tribes who had fled west to avoid the European invasion, and the remnants of battered tribes indigenous to the area. Ohio was also beyond the proclamation line established in 1763 as a promise between the Native Americans and English to limit colonial expansion. This would hold off the population boom just for a few more years. So what does all of this has to do with Bigfoot, Melanie? Well, let me tell you. It adds up to a longer period of time before European population began to explode and allowed more time for the Bigfoots to adapt to the presence of large numbers of people in its territory. Where big animals such as the black bear and the eastern cougar were under pressure from the new colonist, the Bigfoot would have enjoyed a relative period of peace in the Ohio Territory. In later decades, the population of Ohio grew many times over, but even though the current census is over 11 million, much of the population is clustered around major cities. I, for one, can vouch for that. I grew up in rural, middle of nowhere Ohio, okay? I grew up around dense woods, and let me tell you, it's creepy out there at night, all right? So it's not all metropolitan cities. There's like a few cities, but it's mostly farmland and dense woods. Okay? So Bigfoot would thrive in where I grew up. Okay. So the Appalachian Plateau. In the eastern part of the United States, the forests extend from the Appalachian Mountains into the eastern Ohio. The Appalachian Mountains and the associated Appalachian Trail are thought by some researchers to be kind of a Bigfoot superhighway, enabling Sasquatches to migrate up and down the East Coast rather, securely. On the western edge of the Appalachian, there are the Appalachian Plateau, which branches into Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and West Virginia, and up to the eastern part of Ohio. Bigfoot is sighted in all these states. The southeastern area of Ohio features a large amount of wooded area within the Appalachian Plateau. Here are a great number of Bigfoot sightings that have been reported through the years. So much as the Animal Planet show Finding Bigfoot did an investigation on this region. Salt Fork State Park, in particular, is known as a great place to spot Bigfoot. It is the largest state park in Ohio, with over 17,000 acres of land and abundant rivers, streams, and lakes. It seems to be like the perfect place for a Sasquatch to make its home. The Appalachian Trail and the Appalachians, in general, are known for alleged Bigfoot sightings. Might this mountain range be sort of a connection between the eastern states and a solid explanation for how the population of Sasquatch could survive in the east? So, if Bigfoot eats grasses, that's fine in the summer, right? But the climate in Ohio can be tough in the winter. Many skeptics believe there simply isn't enough food throughout much of the year to sustain a population of large creatures such as Sasquatch. But Bigfoot research disagree. They believe the creature is perfectly capable of finding food even through the worst of winter. If Bigfoot hunts, there is certainly enough game in Ohio. And since we know a little about the beast's psychology or physiology, it's hard to speculate on its needs, like how many calories does he need. But we can't assume that they are significant. The state has a strong population of white-tailed deer, along with smaller mammals such as beavers, otters, weasels, groundhogs. There's even like little minks. There's all kinds of little critters out there. But let's just say Bigfoot, maybe this one, strictly omnivore, okay? So all this, might be a fair game for a hungry Sasquatch. Bigfoot may even be able to go long periods without food, and taking down a single deer may provide enough sustenance for several days. There are plenty of water sources nearby. I lived right next to a babbling brook. The state is bordered by the south by the Ohio River and up north by the Lake Erie. And there are so many other smaller rivers that run to each. This makes for great fishing and abundant food for a creature like a Sasquatch. And there's always the possibility that Bigfoot has found other ways to bolster his food supply, such as maybe he's catching a lot of food in the fall and storing it somewhere to make it through a rough winter. Of course, we have no proof of this, but this is just as sound as an idea as anything else, right? Okay. So now we're going to get into some Bigfoot or Grassman sightings in Ohio. First, I'm going to talk about the most famous one, and then I'm going to read off a few from just random people that live in Ohio. The Minerva Monster. In 1978, a family living near Minerva, Ohio, witnessed a 7-foot hairy monster outside their home. Minerva is in eastern Ohio, where many Bigfoot encounters have been reported. The family notified the local sheriff, and the legend of the Minerva monster was born. The police investigated the claims but could find no proof of the creature. But sightings by the family continued, and in some broad daylight. Okay, so right in broad daylight, they see this Bigfoot thing. Some creature was stalking their property, and the police could find no evidence aside from some questionable footprints. The family was swarmed by the media for several weeks, but the sightings died off with the increase of exposure. No definite evidence of the Minerva monster was ever found. The Minerva monster or monsters is considered by many researchers and best eyewitnesses account of Bigfoot of Ohio on record. The family and other witnesses were reliable, and the involvement of the police lends to credibility. The fact that the creature was observed at length in daylight makes it hard to argue a case of mistaken identity of a known animal, and in the end, there are only two possibilities. The witnesses engaged in an elaborate and extremely well-rehearsed hoax, or Bigfoot really was stalking their property. With increasing numbers of reports from Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and even the New England states, it appears that there's a significant Bigfoot population in this part of the country. The Appalachians may provide a central area of security from which relatively large population of Sasquatches could branch out into other adjacent states. For a state like Ohio in particular, which appears to have the perfect combination of woodlands, water sources, and wildlife, it seems almost impossible to imagine Bigfoot wouldn't be present. After all, while Ohio isn't nearly as remote, these are some of the same qualities of the habitat in the Pacific Northwest. If you live in Ohio and you have spotted a Bigfoot, please email me at underthemoonparapod@gmail.com and I will read your story on the show. Or if you'd like to be interviewed, send me an email. We'll do a Zoom or something. All right, so this is from, let me find a long one. This is from Two Broke Girls on December 20th, 2019. In 2018, me and my husband's cousin were driving down the road in Mings County, Ohio. It was around October, and we had my 9-year-old daughter with us and her 4-year-old son. It was almost dark. The sky was light blue. Still, I'd be maybe, say, 6 or 7 p.m. The Bigfoot was crossing the road in front of us, and it was to the edge of my side, probably 20 feet or less from my car. And it was walking upright, and it was like it didn't even register in our heads. Neither of us even said a word until we got a mile down the road, and she's like, did we see something back there? And I'm like, yeah, like a damn giant gorilla. And she looked freaked out and said, yeah, that's kind of what it looked like. But no one ever believes us. The thing looked right back at us and didn't run, just walked swinging its arms at its sides, like when people do when they walk, just getting ready to cross the street. I've been scared of the woods alone now. I used to take the kids hiking. Not anymore. Spooky. All right, this is from Jeremiah on October 7th, 2019. I just had an encounter from what I believe in the Hamilton Park out here in the Chattanooga Valley National Park, around the Kendall Ledges area. There are supposed to have been spotted and heard multiple times over the years. I was hiking, and it got too dark to see, so I had to take out my flashlight to finish the trail. I had just come by a stream when I heard what sounded like a rock fall behind me. I didn't think nothing of it because I figured a walnut or something had fallen out of a tree. But then I got this super eerie feeling, almost instantly, like feeling about 20 or 30 feet to my 7 o'clock. I heard something give out a guttural growl that froze me in my steps. I slowly turned around, trying to make it where it was coming from, when I felt like my eyes had gone where the growl came from and instantly stopped. There was no trail off. It was instant, and it was like no animal sound that I have ever heard in my life. It terrified me, and I ran the rest of the way out of the forest. I ended up getting a migraine and was puking after the fact. But I know what I heard, and whatever made that sound sounded huge, especially for the area I was in. That was spooky. This is from Jim, August 6, 2019. About 20 years ago, my family lived in a mostly rural area in Lima, Ohio. One evening, my mom drove up into our driveway shortly after dusk. Just before she exited her car, she looked up. Standing between the hood of her car and the garage door is what she described as a 7 to 8 foot tall creature, very dark, covered with hair. It stared at her for a moment, then jumped over the hood of her car and ran into the backyard, into the wheat field behind our house. This shook her up instantly. In another area of the surrounding rural farmland, I listened to a farmer the recount of this experience with these creatures, as they would sometimes inhabit old barns that stood a few hundred yards away from his home. He had pictures of a door that had been splintered and thrown into the side of the building after he made the spring-loaded contraption to close the door in an attempt to capture on the inside. He described the creature as being about 8 feet tall, dark hair, and skinny. What made this story interesting was that he also described a younger, shorter creature in tow, which he thought was the creature's offspring. Wow. This is from Kathy, May 21st, 2019. My fiance and I were in the Wilderness Center in Wilmot, Ohio. We were at the pavilion that looked over a decently sized pond. He was sitting on one of the benches with his back to the pond, and I was standing in front of him observing the pond as he lit a cigar. I noticed some movement next to the pine tree, so I watched. We were the only ones there, mind you. The animal, or a Sasquatch, came out from under the pine tree enough to see it. So I made my fiance look as well. He decided to walk on the path briefly, when the next thing we knew, we heard this loud guttural screaming and movement in the woods. We ran back to the car, and we looked back as we were getting into our car that we saw it yet again in the tree line just watching us. Then as we were pulling out of the parking lot, there was a lot across the street for Amish community to park their buggies, and that had a locked gate on it after a certain time. I had seen one over the buggy parking lot by the tree with the long reddish brown hair studying us, and it was only from about 15 or 20 feet from us. We hightailed it out of there. Wow. That was a creepy story. This is from Anonymous. And this will be the last one I read. Narrative. I have only shared this event with family and very close friends. A family member convinced me that it's important to share my Bigfoot experience so that more people will come forward to share theirs. I'm sorry, I'm still not ready to put my name out there. At this time, I was 11 years old, living in Pomeroy, Ohio. There were 4 houses and an old church on my street, which intersected Route 7. Behind 3 of the houses and the church was a very deep ridge, very difficult for someone to climb. At the top of the ridge, there was a huge wooded area that my dad and I hunted in. Between the old church and the ridge, they had started a clearing out area for a new church. The land hadn't been leveled yet, but there was little water holes or puddles everywhere close to the ridge. It was a nice sunny day in May around 5 p.m., so I decided to take a walk. I knew some of the water holes had hundreds of little black tadpoles the last time I visited, and I was curious to see if they had gotten any bigger. When I got to the water holes, which was about 10 foot by 15 foot, I squatted down to see if I could see some tadpoles. There were tadpoles everywhere that were now growing legs. Excuse me. I was so focused on catching the tadpoles that I didn't realize that something had walked to the other side of the water hole next to the ridge and was watching me. When I looked up, my life would never be the same. I remember the hairy creature standing up on 2 legs with its arms straight down to the side. It was 6 to 7 foot tall and built like a refrigerator, and she'll mow you over later. Sorry. It was reddish brown with dark eyes. I really don't remember seeing a face. I knew it wasn't a bear, and it didn't move the entire time I was looking at it. Again, it was only 10 to 15 feet from me. I froze. I couldn't move or yell at the time. Maybe I didn't try. After some time, probably seconds that seemed like minutes, I slowly started back up. As I was backing up, I kept yelling, "No," like 3 or 4 times, I guess. I don't know what else to do. After 3 or 4 backward steps, I tripped on my own 2 feet and went crashing to the ground. I didn't feel like he wanted to hurt me, however. I wasn't going to stick around. Once I got up from falling down, I ran like hell back to the house. I looked back once I was running and it still hadn't moved. It was still standing there watching me. I got to my house in record time and I couldn't wait to tell my dad. After telling my dad the story, he immediately took me to the neighbors to see if he was playing a trick on me. The neighbor said that he had been in the house all day. After telling the neighbor what I saw, my dad and then I went to the water hole to investigate. There were no signs, no tracks found. However, I know my dad believed me. For some reason, I was never afraid to go back in the woods. At least, I don't remember being afraid. I have been in those woods hundreds of times after that day, and I've never seen any clue that the creature was still in the area. I know Bigfoot is real, and I hope this encourages more people to step forward and share their experiences, even if they use anonymous. Thank you, Anonymous. Well, this is going to conclude our episode for this month on Ohio Grassman. So, if you have your own personal Bigfoot Grassman encounter, email me at underthemoonparapod@gmail.com. And if you like all things that are spooky, check out my YouTube link in the description of the show and this episode. I put out graveyard shift videos every week. If you don't know what graveyard shifts are, definitely check that out. It's a ghost brother named Dalen Spratt. He started a great community of people like myself that like to go to cemeteries and speak to, the spirits that may not have been spoken to in a while. And it's a very beautiful thing. So, until next month, my friends, always remember, no matter what, stay spooky.